Good day, everyone. For Telesur, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. To begin this Thursday midday, opposition parties in Honduras, along with the Indignant movement, called for a national strike for this Thursday morning. Now, they seek to pressure the government to stop the political persecution against the opposition and to stop the aggressive privatization measures. Now, the National Resistance Front in Honduras announced the stoppage in coordination with the Libre Party. They called for demonstrations and protests in the country's principal cities and on major highways. And to South America now, Peruvian communities continue to protest the expansion of the mining project known as Las Bambas, which they believe will contaminate their local environment and damage regional agriculture. Activist workers and community members have been protesting for 5 days. Thus far, 4 demonstrators have been killed by security forces and dozens have been injured. A state of emergency has been declared as residents demand a halt to the expansion of the copper mine and justice for those who have been killed.
This man died fighting for his land. We are demanding justice for my brother.
Has anyone from the company approached you about this?
No, they're totally ignoring it.
What we fear, first of all, is pollution, because we live off our land, we live off our animals, we live off the environment. In this area, our products are ecological and we don't want the mine to contaminate us.
The Brazilian president, Dilma Rousseff, reshuffled her cabinet in what is a bid to appease the government coalition and to ease the approval of her fiscal reforms in Congress. Now, she replaced her education minister, cabinet chief, and defense minister. Rousseff has replaced her education minister, Renato Janine Ribeiro, with Aloisio Mercadante, who was her presidential chief of staff. Now, an unidentified source told Reuters the new chief of staff would be Defense Minister Jacques Wagner. Rousseff blamed the political crisis on actors who do not accept the country as a strong democracy whose legitimacy was given by popular vote. Now we go to Mexico. While a federal judge announced a new arrest warrant for extradition to the U.S. against the Sinaloa cartel kingpin Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the Attorney General's office reported 13 drug traffickers were sent to the United States to face trial. Now, among them is the ruthless hitman Edgar Valdez, also known as the Barbie. Now, he is responsible for many homicides, including that of 50 people he buried in one mass grave. Now, in the case of El Chapo, it remains to be seen if the Mexican courts will uphold his extradition to the U.S., given that his lawyers have successfully suspended all previous extradition orders against him.
Edgar Valdez Villarreal, also known as La Barbie, was detained on August 30, 2010 for crimes of organized crime, deprivation of liberty, possession of military-grade weapons, crimes against health and homicide. Valdez Villarreal is wanted by the Federal Court of East Louisiana for drug trafficking and money laundering.
And we go to Argentina now. That's where some of the country's largest media are under the spotlight for breaking regulations over sex trade advertisements. From Buenos Aires now, our correspondent Laureano Ponce with those details.
Several Argentine media holdings are refusing to comply with media regulation laws as they continue to agitate against the government. A decree issued by President Cristina Fernandez banning the publication of sexual commerce advertisements in all platforms has been repeatedly violated by media giants like the Clarín Group, despite the requests for cooperation by Argentina's monitoring agency for sexual commerce advertisements.
We see there is a high level of compliance since 2 or 3 years ago, and they remain high as most media stopped publishing these advertisements. They understood that if they did publish them, They would be facilitating sexual exploitation. However, there are a few that keep refusing to comply with the regulation.
Hay, sin embargo, un pequeño grupo que se resiste a cumplir con la normativa.
While 84% of the monitored media comply with the regulation, two of Argentina's largest newspapers, Clarín and La Capital, are responsible for almost 60% of the sexual trade advertisements.
Frente a los alegatos que se hacen habitualmente desde quienes representan legalmente.
The managers of these media groups say the regulation reduces their freedom of expression, but we do not accept that. There are a number of judicial rulings that show we are not regulating their editorial line, but their commercial area. And if we are talking about making profit out of trading human beings, then we are going to do everything we can to make it stop.
Si aquí se trata de comerciar con seres humanos, sí, vamos a hacer todo lo posible porque eso se detenga.
The Clarín Group also keeps violating the media law approved in 2009, which establishes a maximum of 24 TV and radio broadcasting licenses for any media group. According to the Federal Media Authority, Clarín owns almost 300.
What Clarín seeks to do is to preserve its ruling position. Its CEO, Héctor Magneto, seeks to do it too. They have the memories of previous years. They were used to be the ones who took the decisions, and they used their influence to extort the public powers and the democracy.
This illegal action seems to prove that, like any other sector in the business establishment, corporate media prioritizes profit over the public good. Laureano Ponce, Telesur, Buenos Aires.
Moving on, British Prime Minister David Cameron said in Jamaica that his government would not make slavery reparations to the Caribbean nation. Now he asked the island nation to just move on. The subject of compensation was brought on by a prominent Jamaican academic and CARICOM reparations commission chairperson, Sir Hilary Beckles. Cameron's Jamaica visit is the first by a British head of state in 14 years, after emphasizing the importance of historical ties between his country and Jamaica. Cameron revealed new British investment plans in the Caribbean.
Today I can announce a major new package of British investment in this region. £360 million in new financial commitments, including a £300 million much-needed infrastructure fund across the Caribbean. I'm launching a new UK Caribbean infrastructure partnership fund to build real, tangible things that will make a difference for people across the Caribbean. Roads, bridges, ports, critical economic infrastructure that will set the foundations for growth and prosperity and in turn reduce poverty, while helping the region become more resilient to the risks of climate change.
St. Lucia is one of several Caribbean countries hoping to strengthen children's social protection, food security, and nutritional status through the school feeding program. Many countries have described the program as costly but necessary. Our correspondent in St. Lucia now, Allison Kentish, with this report.
A 2012 study by the Food and Agriculture Organization found that the school feeding programs promote school attendance, bolster the learning process, and foster local development through the sourcing of produce from family farmers. Agriculture officials in St. Lucia say this triple-win approach is working, and now the island, like many other Caribbean islands, is expanding the program, which hopes to eradicate hunger in schools. School principal Francis Mooney is happy that the program is coming to his school.
At our school, a large number of parents are unemployed. We have a large number of vulnerable families. And this initiative will definitely bring a great deal of relief to the parents. Student attendance will definitely improve, and parents will no longer be singing the chorus, "My child cannot come to school. I have nothing at home to give him or her."
The initiative gets students engaged in the cultivation of food crops. The country's agriculture minister says the school feeding program is vital in ensuring that no child is left behind due to hunger. He says it involves tackling the chronic problem of poor nutrition, which is crippling healthcare systems through non-communicable diseases.
That teachers every single day And probably some teachers did it today and this morning. A child will come to you very quietly because the child is ashamed and say to you, sir, miss, you know, I did not go home for lunch. And you ask why. They give you some excuse, first of all. Well, my mother is not there, my daddy is not there, and the house is closed. But if you inquire and you inquire, many times you find out that it's because they have no food at home.
The school feeding program is part of St. Lucia's response to the Secretary General of the United Nations Zero Hunger Challenge, which was formally launched in St. Lucia in November 2014.
And after the break, we'll see some of the reactions to the Palestinian president's speech yesterday at the UN.
Behind the power, we lift the lid on some of the world's most ruthless figures. Open file, only on telesurtv.net in English. Wherever the news, you'll be there. We need to understand the world we live in. We require news with critical points of view, thorough analysis and social commitment. This information is vital to think, to understand and to change. The world demands a new perspective. telesurtv.net/English. Wherever the news, you'll be there. An insight into Africa today with Bill Fletcher. The Global African, only on telesurtv.net in English. Wherever the news, you'll be there.
Russia has mounted a second day of airstrikes against what it says are targets of the Daesh terrorist group. Now, according to the Defense Ministry in Moscow, one of the strikes destroyed a facility that aimed to rig cars with explosives for suicide attacks. The facility was located in the city of Homs. Reports in some Western media say that the areas attacked appeared to be held by other groups opposed to the Syrian government. But Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has denied those claims. During a speech at the United Nations General Assembly on Wednesday, President Mahmoud Abbas announced that Palestine will no longer abide by peace agreements with Israel. Abbas also redeclared Palestine as occupied territory hours after Israel launched airstrikes on Gaza. While some Palestinians celebrated the historic event, others felt the speech fell short of its buildup.
This is a very important speech because it reveals that this is the end of a period which lasted for 22 years of relying on negotiations with Israel, which failed because of Israeli positions. It also means the failure of Oslo because Israel refused to implement it. This is a very serious matter because it means that Palestinians are not committed anymore to any agreements with Israel.
Israel has violated every single article of Oslo, has refused to implement the agreement in all its details, and therefore it has been murdered, so to speak, by Israel a long time ago. It was used as an instrument for prolongation, for stalling, for building more settlements, for the illegal annexation of Jerusalem.
And with more now on President Abbas and his comments that Palestine will not commit to peace accords with Israel as long as it breaches peace obligations. Noor Harazin now has filed this report.
President of the Palestinian Authority Mahmoud Abbas told the General Assembly that the Palestinian side is no longer bound to the Oslo Accord peace agreements signed previously with Israel, as long as Israel continues to violate them. Abbas made it clear that either the Palestinian Authority will be the conduit for Palestinian people from occupation to independence, or Israel takes its responsibility as an occupying state. The president's speech came shortly before a ceremony was held at the Rose Garden to celebrate the raising of the Palestinian flag.
For sure we are happy. We are making history. Maybe the speech of our president did not meet our very high Palestinian expectations, but still it was powerful enough to send a strong message to the world that Palestine does exist and that we will fight for our freedom even if it means breaking all agreements and accords.
On September 10, the United Nations General Assembly voted for a resolution that allowed the flags of Palestine and the Vatican to be raised at the United Headquarters in New York. The resolution was backed by 119 countries with 45 abstentions and 8 votes against, including the United States, Israel, and Australia. Noor Harazin, Telesu TV, Gaza.
Trade ministers of 12 Pacific countries are meeting in Atlanta in the United States to discuss the thorniest points of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement, known as TPP. Now, this agreement, which is being discussed behind closed doors, has been heavily criticized by labor organizations and social movements in the U.S. and also in Latin America. Melinda St. Louis now with the International Campaigns Director for Public Citizen. She joins us to explain more. Now, her group opposes TPP. Melinda, thanks so much for joining us. Just to start briefly, if you could just give us an overview of exactly why you oppose this agreement.
Well, the Trans-Pacific Partnership is a massive corporate giveaway disguised as a trade agreement. It is being sold to the publics of the 12 countries currently part of the negotiations as something that would boost exports and growth and jobs. But what we know is that behind closed doors, there are multinational corporations are pushing an extreme agenda to benefit corporate profits at the expense of people. There are many examples. We are very concerned about global access to medicines. Big pharmaceutical companies are pushing to expand their monopolies, which would block generic medicines, making it more difficult for people to have access to life-saving drugs. In fact, here in Atlanta, just yesterday, a cancer patient who relies on these medicines was arrested trying to speak to the ministers to address and to implore them to not expand monopolies for tens of thousands of dollars for people who are suffering from cancer. She was arrested. There were concerns around extreme corporate power and tribunals where corporations can sue our government outside of our court systems to be able to challenge laws like public health regulations or environmental regulations, bans on toxic substances, and get tens or millions or billions of dollars in taxpayer compensation in secret tribunals. These are just a couple of examples. We're concerned about what the impacts are going to be on decent work and wages in the United States and in other TPP countries, because it creates this race to the bottom where there are countries that do not have the right to organize trade unions, such as in Vietnam, that will be competing against workers in the United States. That creates this race to the bottom. And we've seen, unfortunately, the impact of these agreements in the past. And for that reason, there is a massive mobilization in the United States across the board. Consumer organizations, workers' rights organizations, trade unions, environmental organizations are united in opposing this deal.
And how you were talking about a sort of a list of negative impacts there. Explain to us how you have come to the conclusion that this would necessarily lead to those negative effects.
Well, as I mentioned, it's being negotiated behind closed doors, so we have not seen an actual text except for what has leaked through WikiLeaks. We know through those leaks that there are provisions that would increase drug prices for life-saving medications. We know about these secret tribunals that I was talking about. We have seen that secret text because it leaked, and we have basically talked to negotiators for the past 5 years. This has been going on for more than 6 years of negotiations where we have been putting out proposals for a different model for trade agreements, and we have been basically ignored, while 600 corporations, corporate advisors, they have access to the text. They are able to provide their input, while the public and their public interest organizations have been locked out.
Well, it certainly sounds like you believe that there is a lot of corporate influence going into this deal, and that perhaps much of that influence will have a negative effect on the common man. Melinda, St. Louis, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we continue now. There are reports of more fierce fighting in the Afghan city of Kunduz after the government claimed that its forces had retaken control of the strategic northern city from the Taliban. The battle for Kunduz has been raging for 3 days as Afghan forces launched a counter-offensive backed by NATO special forces and U.S. air support. A government spokesperson said the city was recaptured after a special operation overnight. However, the Taliban claimed they drove out Afghan forces again this morning. Just 1 day after several parcel bomb attacks occurred in China, another blast has rocked the southern Chinatown of Liuqing. According to state media, the blast occurred at an apartment block at 8 in the morning local time, and no casualties, thankfully, have been reported. Now, the reason behind the attack is not clear, and investigators have yet to confirm whether or not this latest incident is connected to the multiple explosions on Wednesday that claimed 7 lives and injured 51 people. And figures are still coming in with regards to the death toll as a result of the Hajj stampede that happened on September 24th in Saudi Arabia. Now, according to the president of the Malian Association of Travel Agencies and Tourism, at least 53 Malians lost their lives, while 100 more are still missing. Now, Iranian authorities say over 460 of its citizens and 60 pilgrims from there died in the crush, but Pakistan, India, and Indonesia have suggested the death toll may be even higher. 2 Turkish soldiers were gunned down by suspected Kurdish militants as they left for work in the Diyarbakir province. Now, a bomb was remotely detonated while a military vehicle crossed a bridge in the southern town of Silvan. 3 security personnel were also injured. This comes a day after Turkey said its fighter jets targeted PKK hideouts in northern Iraq. Both sides have been engaged in daily conflict since the collapse of a ceasefire in July, in which more than 100 security personnel and hundreds of militants have been killed. Political tensions have increased ahead of the elections there on November 1st. In the United States now, the Republican presidential candidate, there he is, Donald Trump, has once again lashed out at immigrants and refugees. Maybe not a surprise there. On this occasion, he said if elected president, he would deport all Syrian refugees back to their country. Now, the billionaire has said he would deport all undocumented immigrants from the United States, referring mainly to Mexicans and Central Americans. Trump expressed outrage at the number of refugees the U.S. has said it will take in. Global warming combined with natural phenomenon like El Nino will see high temperatures in 2015 and 2016 as a consequence. More on that in our next segment.
Meteorológico del Reino Unido, tanto 2015 y 2016.
According to experts of the Meteorological Service of the United Kingdom, 2015 and 2016 could be among the hottest years ever registered. British scientists also state that the El Nino phenomenon has local implications, with drier conditions in some Asian countries and in Australia. They even forecast that the fall and winter seasons will have more rainfall in the states of California and the United States. that has lived an intense drought for the past 4 years. The Meteorological Service also foresees that the cooling in the Atlantic Ocean could lead to cooler and drier summers in the north of Europe.
Pueda provocar veranos menos calurosos y más secos en el norte de Europa.
The world's #1 tennis player, Serena Williams, has announced she will not be playing in any more tournaments this year. Now, Serena has ended her season early and has withdrawn from next week's China Open in Beijing and the WTA Finals in Singapore. Serena has given her health priorities, stating that she needs time to heal. The fact that she has pulled out of the tournaments means she will lose out on hundreds of thousands of dollars in bonuses and prize money. But despite missing out on the 2 final tournaments of the year, the 21 Grand Slam title holder will still end 2015 as world #1. Asia's largest film festival is in its 20th year and opened with a film from India this year. The Busan International Film Festival takes place in South Korea, and it opened with the coming-of-age musical drama titled Zuban. A total of 300 movies from about 75 countries will be screened until October 10th. Chinese drama Mountain Cry by Larry Yang was the film chosen to close this year's event. On Wednesday, the Eiffel Tower was dressed with a colorful light show in honor of the city's annual Fashion Week event. Every night for the duration of Paris Fashion Week, special lighting will be displayed on the Eiffel Tower. Paris is home to some of the world's most renowned design houses, and about 60,000 people work in the fashion industry. Fashion continues to generate significant output for Paris. The event runs there until October 7th. Pretty cool, I guess. Plenty more on those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. For Telesur English, I'm Cody White. Have a great day.